Hi everyone, this is Yana Smakula for simonsaysstamp.com and thank you for joining me today. February 7th is the National Send a Card to a Friend Day, so I wanted to encourage you to make some cards or use some of those that you've made in the past and mail them to your friends. I thought it would be appropriate to share a video tutorial showing how to make some quick and easy friendship cards for friends who live far away. Most of my crafty friends live far, some across different US states, others are outside of the US, so I wanted to make a few clever cards to highlight some of the places where they live and simply to just indicate that even though we live far away, we are great friends and that I miss them a lot. As I was going through my stash looking for a perfect sentiment, I came across this Wishing You stamp set from Simon. One of the sentiments here reads, "Wishing we lived closer because I miss you." And this is the perfect sentiment for the kind of cards that I had in mind. Now, there are two stamps in this stamp set that say wishing, and one is a scripty font and another one is a regular font. Both work great and both pair well with the "we lived closer because I miss you" part. I also needed to stamp some sort of a map or a city skyline to complete the look I was going for. I found a few stamps in my stash that worked wonderfully with the sentiment. The first one I have here is the US map coloring stamp from Hero Arts. This one is a big stamp that covers the entire front of an A2 card. It can also be stamped just partially onto a card to maybe leave some room for sentiment, and I'll show you what I mean in just a second. Other stamps that I really wanted to use for these cards are the Hero Arts destination stamps. So here I have a few of those. I have San Diego, Paris, London, New Orleans, and there are actually quite a few of those available with different cities. I think there are about 13 different stamps in that collection, and I have just 4 here. If you don't have these, there are many other map type and cityscape type stamps. I know that Neat and Tangled has a very cool origami map stamp set that features the entire globe. Also, Alt New has several stamp sets that feature city skylines of popular cities across the world. So there are a lot of different stamp sets to choose from and to play with. Now, obviously, not every city in the world will have a coordinating stamp, but you can still use those stamps and make them work for you, for a personalized card for your friend who lives in a particular city or a state or a country. So I'm going to start by stamping the sentiment, "Wishing you lived closer because I miss you," and I'm going to use Simon's Intense Black ink. I'm stamping onto white panels. These are cut to 4 by 5¼ inches, and I'll be foam mounting those onto A2 landscape top folding note cards made out of Simon's shimmer cardstock. So I'm using my Misti stamp positioner today, and I'm double stamping the sentiment onto several panels. I'm placing the sentiment on the right on some of the panels and on the left on other panels, just so that my cards aren't all the same. I'm also going to switch up the wishing and use both fonts for my projects. I really like both of them and I couldn't decide which one I wanted to use, so I just went ahead and used both. I did plan to color most of my cards using Tonic Studios alcohol markers, but I also wanted to share an idea without any coloring for those of you who might not like to color or who might be intimidated by coloring. So instead of black, I used Hero Arts Pool to Navy Ombre ink pad and inked up my sentiment using that ink pad for a nice ombre look. There are a lot of different ombre ink pad colors, so feel free to use any other color that you like. I also used the same ink pad later when I got to stamping the city part of the card. So I got a nice transition of color going on that replaced the need for coloring. Next, I switched out my stamps and grabbed the US map cling stamp from Hero Arts. I removed the black foam pad from my Misti and positioned the stamp where I wanted it on my project. Now, I didn't want to stamp the entire map, so I only created a partial impression, one with the West Coast states and one with the East Coast states. And again, I double stamped each image for a perfect impression. And I think that this map stamp is very versatile. You can use it for a variety of projects. All you need to do is pick up a good sentiment to go with it. Now here's another panel I stamped where I sort of overlapped the map with the sentiment. I didn't quite like the way it looked. It would have been better if the map was stamped using a lighter ink color, like light gray, for example. I also wanted to stamp the destination images from Hero Arts, and as I was just about ready to use them as is, meaning mounted onto a wooden block, I spotted that some aren't adhered straight onto the block. Now, because these stamps are made by hand, images aren't always adhered perfectly straight onto wood. It doesn't matter much if it's an image like a flower or such, but when it's something that has some text on it, you want the text to be positioned perfectly straight. So I removed the stamp from the block and I just carefully peeled it and I placed it inside my Misti stamp positioner just like any other cling stamp. I inked it up and I stamped my image. This way I was able to double stamp this image for a more blacker outline, and I was also able to make sure that I had it perfectly straight. After I was done stamping, I cleaned my stamp using my stamp chamois and simply repositioned it onto the block. The adhesive was still there on the block and on the stamp, so I was able to reposition the stamp back onto wood without any problems. And I love my wood block stamps to stay on wood, as I often use them as decorations in my craft room. I display them on a shelf, as these stamps just look so very pretty. So let me show you this one more time. Here I have another panel with a sentiment, and for this one, I want to use Paris destination stamp. But I don't want to stamp the word Paris. I want just the image. I don't want to add any additional text to my card. I also want to make sure I align this image perfectly in my Misti. So I grabbed a new product, Misti Creative Corners, and this is actually the first time I'm using these. Basically what these are, they are corners of all sorts that help you better position and align your images inside the Misti. I used a 2 ruler from the set and I placed it along the edge of my Misti and then placed the stamp along the ruler, making sure my stamp is positioned straight. So the ruler acted sort of as a spacer here. Now, like I mentioned, I didn't want to stamp the word Paris, so prior to inking my stamp, I cut a strip of washi tape and covered that part of my stamp up. Next, I inked up the stamp using Simon's Intense Black ink pad, removed the washi tape piece, and went ahead and stamped the image onto my panel. I wanted to double stamp it, so again I added a fresh piece of washi tape, masking the Paris word, inked up the stamp, and stamped it again in the exact same spot. Just like that, I stamped other destination images onto my sentiment panels to create some simple cards. Now, the reason I wanted to mask the city names on some of these is because I wanted the image to look a little bit more generic, be less specific. So for example, for a friend who lives in France, but who is not located in Paris, I wanted to make a France-themed card, but I didn't want it to say Paris. I hope that makes sense. And the same with the San Diego stamp. I have a lot of friends who live in coastal cities, and this image is a perfect representation of a coastal city. Lastly, I used my panel where I had the sentiment stamped using an ombre ink pad, and I used the same ombre ink pad to stamp the city image. I wanted to mention that when I finished my stamping, I noticed some leftover adhesive transfer from the stamps onto my Misti door. To clean that adhesive residue, I sprayed my Misti door with Hero Arts Ultra Clean and I wiped it with a wet wipe, and it took all of that adhesive away. Now, there are special adhesive remover products like Undo and similar, but the stamp cleaner actually did the trick and I didn't have to use anything else. I wanted to do some quick coloring on my cards, simple ombre coloring, and I used Tonic Nuvo Creative pens. These are alcohol-based markers, very affordable, and they come in packs of 3. So you get 3 shades of one color, which is very handy if you don't want to spend a lot of time deciding and exploring which colors work well together for perfect blending. I only have a handful of their markers, I don't have them all, so I'll just show you a few colors and I'll only be using 2 shades of one color to do my coloring. Like I mentioned, I was making quite a lot of cards and I didn't want to spend an hour coloring one. So these markers are double-sided. On one side, you have a broad tip that is great for coloring large sections quickly, and on the other side, you have a fine tip for coloring detailed images. Here I'm using 2 colors from the Rosy Pinks set, and I'm just quickly adding a darker color at the bottom of my image and then coming in with a lighter color at the top. I love how easy those markers blend, and I like the colors a lot. Plus, like I mentioned, they are very affordable, and I think they are great markers to try if you're just starting to explore alcohol markers, or even if you're looking to add more colors to your collection. Here I also have 2 markers from the Rich Reds set, and again you can see how nicely and effortlessly they blend together. Beautiful transition of color. So I'm going to use these 2 to color my London card, and I'm using a darker color at the bottom and a lighter shade at the top. I also used same markers to color the US map image, and here I'm using 2 markers from the Woodland Greens set, and instead of coloring the entire map, I just did some quick selective coloring and colored a few of the states. I colored 5 in total, 3 using one color, and 2 more using another marker color. After my coloring was done, I foam mounted my panels onto A2 top folding landscape cards created out of Simon's shimmer cardstock. I used a few colors of cardstock here to coordinate with my coloring. I was going for a simple monochromatic look. To finish these cards, I used Nuvo drops in several colors, and I just added a few dots here and there to complete my projects. I used gloss crystal drops in apple green. I love this vibrant green color, and I used this one on my partial US map and also on the San Diego card. For the Paris card, I used gloss crystal drops in oyster gray. For the London card, I went with a different type of drops. I used jewel drops in strawberry. These dry translucent with a little hint of color. And finally, for the New Orleans card, I used gloss drops in Caribbean Ocean. Now I just need to wait for these to dry, and I usually leave them overnight, although it doesn't really take that long. And I'm off to my post office to send some happy mail to my friends. I'm inviting you to do the same and either make some new projects following my example here, or pick a few cards from your stash and send some happy mail to your friends. Have fun stamping! Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope I was able to inspire you to create. Be sure to give this idea a try and do tag us on social media so we can take a peek at your projects. You can find the list of supplies I used for these cards down below. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up and to subscribe to this channel if you haven't yet done so. Thanks so much for joining me today. I will see you next time. Bye!